You ever have one of those days where everything seems fine, until Karen gets involved? Well, that was me, standing on the edge of my empty lakeside property, waiting for the delivery of my brand new log cabin. Months of planning, permits, and paperwork had finally led to this moment. I could already picture myself sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise over the water. But then she appeared. Her name? Karen, the self-proclaimed president of our neighborhood's HOA. The problem? My cabin wasn't exactly her idea of the community aesthetic. Never mind that it was my land, legally zoned, paid for, and completely approved by the county. Nope, Karen had her own rulebook, handwritten, laminated, and stuffed with sticky notes. The truck carrying my cabin sections had just pulled onto the gravel road when Karen came storming down her driveway, arms flailing, phone in hand. "Stop that truck! You can't bring that here!" she shouted. The delivery guys froze, unsure whether to laugh or call security. I walked up calmly, paperwork in hand. "Karen, I've got all my permits. This is happening today." She sneered, squinting like she could somehow erase my documents just by glaring at them. "Well, not if I can help it. I'm calling the HOA and the sheriff." And she did, right there, screaming into her phone like she was reporting a crime. Within minutes, the road was blocked. The HOA sent out a temporary halt notice, an unofficial piece of paper that meant absolutely nothing legally. But it was enough to scare the delivery company. They refused to unload until the matter was resolved. So, there I stood, watching my dream cabin sitting on a trailer, stuck on the road while Karen paraded around like she'd just saved the neighborhood from a national emergency. That's when I made a decision, one that would turn this whole situation upside down. If Karen didn't want my cabin delivered by road, then I'd deliver it from the sky. I went home, called a friend in aerial logistics, and said the words that started it all. "Can we move a prefab cabin with a helicopter?" His answer changed everything. "Absolutely. When do you want it done?" And just like that, the plan was in motion. When I first said the words, "deliver my cabin by helicopter," even I thought it sounded crazy, but crazy was exactly what this situation called for. Karen had locked down the road with HOA no-access cones and stood guard like a soldier defending her turf. Every time the delivery crew tried to move an inch, she screamed, "That's a violation." Fine, I thought. If she wanted to play gatekeeper, I'd just go over the gate. I called up my buddy, Luke, a commercial pilot who runs a heavy-lift helicopter company. When I told him what happened, he laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. "You want me to airlift your cabin over her property?" "Exactly," I said. "Can you do it safely?" "Safely? Oh yeah. Quietly? Not a chance." "Perfect." Within hours, we were running the logistics. Luke explained that a Sikorsky S-64 Sky Crane, yes, the same kind used for firefighting and construction, could lift my 8-ton log cabin with ease. All we needed was clearance from the county, aviation office, and a flat landing zone near the lake. I had both. That night, as I looked at the maps and flight routes, I could almost hear Karen's shriek echoing in my head when she'd see it happen. But this wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was about finishing what I started, fair and square. The next morning, I called the HOA office to update them. Karen answered, "Of course." "Hello, this is Karen speaking, HOA president." "Hi, Karen," I said cheerfully. "Just wanted to let you know I'll be completing my cabin delivery tomorrow morning." Her tone turned sharp. "Don't you dare! You are in direct violation of HOA landscaping code section." "Actually," I interrupted, "I'll be delivering it by air." There was silence. Then she laughed, a short, disbelieving laugh. "By air? You're joking." "See you at 10 a.m., I replied and hung up. Luke's team prepped everything. They marked the coordinates, tested the sling cables, and got FAA clearance for the short flight. This wasn't a stunt. It was legal, insured, and perfectly allowed. By sunrise the next day, a low hum rolled over the hills. Birds scattered from the trees as the massive orange helicopter came into view, sunlight glinting off its blades. Luke's voice crackled over the radio. "Cabin delivery inbound. ETA 3 minutes." And there she was, Karen, standing on her dock in her robe, coffee mug trembling in her hand as the rotors thundered overhead. She had no idea what was about to happen. The sound was deafening. You could feel it in your chest, that deep, bone-shaking thump of the rotors slicing through the morning air. The whole lake shimmered with ripples from the downwash. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones in hand, capturing the unbelievable sight, a cabin, dangling beneath a helicopter, flying straight toward my property. And right in the middle of it all, Karen. She was standing on her dock, her bathrobe whipping around in the wind, yelling words no one could hear over the roar. Her coffee mug flew out of her hand and splashed into the lake. She pointed at the helicopter, like she was trying to order it to stop by pure force of will. "He can't do that!" she screamed, her voice barely cutting through the chaos. But the helicopter didn't care. Neither did I. Luke hovered steady, radioing in. Target zone clear. Beginning descent. I stood on my property line, hard hat on, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. The crowd of neighbors watched in awe. The cabin slowly lowered, perfectly aligned with the foundation pad we'd built weeks earlier. Dust and pine needles whipped through the air as the steel cables tensed and released. Karen ran to the property line, waving her phone like a badge. This is illegal! You can't just fly a house over my property. I calmly stepped forward, voice steady. Actually, Karen, FAA regulations say as long as I'm above 500 feet and not dropping debris, I'm good. Her jaw dropped. You can't be serious. I'm very serious, I said, watching as Luke guided the cabin gently down. With a final thump, the cabin touched down. Perfect alignment. Not a single shingle out of place. The helicopter released the cables, rose back into the air, and did a slow, majestic loop before disappearing over the tree line. The neighbors erupted in cheers and laughter. Phones were everywhere, capturing every second. Karen stood frozen, hair tangled, robe flapping, eyes wide like she'd just witnessed the end of the world. She turned to me, trembling with rage. You're going to regret this. I'll have you reported. I smiled. To who? The air police? Her lips moved, but no sound came out. For once, Karen was speechless. As Luke landed nearby to shake my hand, the HOA email notifications started pinging on my phone. Karen had already started her campaign, calling it reckless, unsafe, and a threat to neighborhood harmony. Little did she know. Things were about to go viral. By that afternoon, I had already started getting texts. Not from the HOA, but from friends, co-workers, even my cousin across the country. Dude, is this you? One message read, followed by a video clip. Sure enough, there it was. My helicopter delivery, filmed from at least 5 different angles. Someone had even slowed it down, added dramatic music, and captioned it. When HOA Karen blocks the road, so you deliver by air. Within hours, it exploded. Views skyrocketed into the millions. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. People were calling it the greatest HOA, takedown in history. Others dubbed me the cabin pilot or heliman. Karen, of course, wasn't laughing. That evening, she marched down my driveway again, this time in full makeup, clipboard in hand, and a camera crew of 2 HOA board members trailing behind her. She looked like she was preparing for a courtroom scene. You have violated at least 7 community regulations, she declared, waving a stack of papers dramatically. You have endangered property, disrupted the peace, and humiliated this neighborhood publicly. Karen, I said, barely holding back a grin, you realize the only person humiliated here is you. Her eyes narrowed. I'll sue you for defamation. Defamation? I laughed. You walked into every single video yourself. You posed for the internet. The HOA board members shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing they weren't standing beside her. One whispered, maybe we should let this go, Karen. But she wasn't letting anything go. She launched into a speech about community integrity and protecting property values. The irony, of course, was that since the video went viral, people had been calling the HOA office, not to complain, but to ask if there were lots for sale. By the next morning, real estate agents were reporting spikes in property interest. Everyone wants to live where the helicopter cabin guy lives, one agent said in a TV interview. Meanwhile, Karen's tirades were all over social media. Memes flooded in. Someone edited her shouting under the helicopter into a rock music video. Another person added subtitles like, HOA levels of rage maximum. The funniest part? Even the local news picked it up. Their headline read, Man airlifts cabin over HOA and lands internet fame. The story made national news. I was getting interview requests left and right. Karen, on the other hand, stopped showing her face around the neighborhood for a while. But she wasn't done. Not yet. She had one last desperate move up her sleeve. If there's one thing you should know about Karen, it's that she doesn't go down without a fight. Or at least a loud one. 3 days after the video went viral, I thought things had finally settled. The cabin was in place, the roof was sealed, and the internet had already moved on to the next wild headline. But then, I got a letter taped to my door. It was an official-looking envelope with the HOA logo on top. Inside, in bold capital letters, it read, Mandatory removal notice, unauthorized aerial delivery. I almost laughed out loud. She actually typed up her own legal document. It wasn't signed by any county office, just Karen HOA president. 10 minutes later, I saw her marching down my driveway again, this time flanked by 2 police officers. She had a folder in her hands and a triumphant smirk on her face. Good morning, she said sweetly. I'm here to enforce an HOA violation. The officer stepped forward, looking awkward. Sir, she says you illegally airlifted a structure without local clearance. I handed him a copy of my FAA approval, my building permit, and the county's zoning authorization. Everything was cleared, I said calmly. You're welcome to call the county office if you need to verify. He flipped through the papers, then looked back at Karen. Ma'am, this looks legitimate. Her smile vanished. That can't be right, she snapped. He violated HOA rules. The officer sighed. Ma'am, HOA rules don't override federal aviation regulations. Karen's face turned beet red. But he humiliated me. Ma'am, the officer said, clearly done with her nonsense. Being embarrassed on the internet isn't a crime. The look on her face was priceless, like her entire world just cracked down the middle. She sputtered, turned on her heels, and stomped back to her car. The officers exchanged a look and shrugged before leaving. That moment was the end of it. The HOA quietly stopped sending me letters. Karen resigned as president 2 weeks later, apparently due to stress, but everyone knew the truth. The cabin became a local landmark. People still drive by to take photos, calling it the Flying Cabin. Even months later, I'll meet someone who says, "Wait, you're that guy?" And yes, I'm that guy, the one who flew his cabin over an HOA Karen's head just to build his dream. So here's what I learned. Sometimes, when someone tries to block your path, you don't argue. You just fly over them.